Dadperfectrevenge. You know what they say about no good deed going unpunished? Well, let me tell you a story that'll make you think twice about helping family when they're down on their luck. My name's Harold Peterson, but everyone calls me Hal. I'm 68 years old, been retired from Ford Motor Company for about 3 years now. Worked the line for 42 years, saved every penny I could, and bought myself a nice little house with a 2-car garage and workshop out back. Lost my wife Martha 8 years ago to cancer, and since then it's just been me and my projects. The house sits on about half an acre in a quiet neighborhood where people still wave when they drive by. Martha and I bought it in 1982 when Ron was just a baby. She picked out the kitchen tile, I built the deck, and together we turned it into the kind of place where you want to grow old. The workshop out back was my sanctuary. 400 square feet of organized tools, workbenches I'd built myself, and enough space to take on any project that caught my fancy. After Martha passed, that workshop became even more important. It's where I went when the house felt too quiet, where I could lose myself in the rhythm of measuring, cutting, and building. I had a 1967 Mustang Fastback that had been restoring for 10 years, taking my time with every detail. Chrome bumpers I'd polished by hand, an engine I'd rebuilt twice just to get it perfect. That car represented everything I loved about working with my hands. Patience, precision, and the satisfaction of bringing something beautiful back to life. The whole mess started back in 2016 when my son Ron called me up. He'd been laid off from his insurance job, where he'd worked for 8 years, and while his wife Karen was making decent money as a real estate agent, it wasn't enough to cover their rent in the city plus student loans and credit card debt they'd accumulated. "Dad," he said, and I could hear the embarrassment in his voice. "I hate to ask, but could we stay with you for a while? Just until I get back. On my feet, maybe 6 months, a year at most." Now, I raised Ron to be a good man, taught him to work hard and treat people right. When he was a kid, he'd spend hours in the workshop with me, learning how to use a screwdriver, how to measure twice and cut once, how to take pride in doing things the right way. So, when he needed help, I didn't even think about it. "Come on home, son," I told him. "House is plenty big for all of us." That was my first mistake. Karen showed up with her nose already in the air, looking around my place like she was inspecting a used car lot. She was 34, sharp as a tack when it came to business, but had this way of talking that made you feel about 2 feet tall. She wore expensive clothes and carried herself like someone who was used to getting her way. "It's very rustic," she said, staring at my workshop through the kitchen window. She said, "Rustic the way you might say termite infested." "Built that workshop myself," I told her, trying to be my life to suit her preferences. In the my life to suit her preferences. In the beginning, things seemed okay on the surface. Ron helped me with yard work on weekends, and we'd talk about his job search over coffee in the mornings. Karen would cook dinner sometimes, though she always had something to say about my pots and pans being outdated, or my spice rack being inefficiently organized. We watched football on Sundays, and I told myself this arrangement was working out fine. But I've been around long enough to know when someone's marking their territory, and Karen was definitely marking hers. It started small, the way these things always do. She'd rearrange my kitchen cabinets because they weren't logical. She'd move my reading glasses from where I'd left them on the counter because that wasn't their proper place. Little things that individually seemed helpful, but collectively felt like an invasion. Then she moved Martha's photo from the living room mantel to a shelf in the back hallway. When I put it back, she moved it again. "Hal," she said one day, using that tone you'd use with a child who'd misbehaved, "don't you think it's time to let go of the past? All these old photos are just depressing. They make the house feel like a museum." I bit my tongue. This was my house, but Ron was my son, and I didn't want to cause problems. Martha had raised me better than that. She always said, family comes first, even when family gets complicated. By the second year, Karen had gotten bolder. She started talking about improvements the house needed. New paint, new furniture, a more open concept feel. She'd bring home fabric samples and paint chips without asking what I thought, just assuming I'd go along with whatever she decided. "We really should update this place," she'd say, looking around the living room like it was a home, improvement project waiting to happen. "These dark colors are so depressing." But what really got to me was when she started eyeing my workshop. She'd walk out there while I was working, supposedly just getting some fresh air, but I could see her looking around, taking mental inventory. "You know, Hal," she said one Saturday afternoon as I was sanding down a cabinet door, "this space has so much potential. Have you ever thought about converting it into something more practical?" "It is practical," I told her, not looking up from my work. "Been using it just fine for 40 years. I mean, for today's needs, like a home office or maybe a nice guest suite, something that would actually add value to the property." That's when I should have seen the writing on the wall. Karen wasn't just making conversation, she was planning. By the third year, the invasion was complete. Karen announced one day that she needed a proper home office for her real estate business. The dining room table wasn't professional enough for client meetings, she said. She needed space, privacy, and a proper setup. The workshop would be perfect, she declared, like it was a solved equation. All that space is just going to waste anyway. I tried to reason with her. "Karen, that's my workspace. I've got 40 years of tools organized exactly how I need them. My projects, my—" "Projects?" she interrupted, with a laugh that wasn't particularly friendly. "Hal, be honest. When's the last time you actually finished a project out there? That old car has been sitting in the same spot for years." That stung because it had some truth to it. Since Martha died, I'd been slower to finish things. The Mustang restoration had slowed to a crawl, not because I'd lost interest, but because completing it felt like closing a chapter I wasn't ready to end. Martha used to bring me coffee while I worked on it, used to tease me about spending more time with that car than with her. But Ron, who I'd expected to back me up, just stood there nodding along with his wife. "Dad, maybe it would be good for you to have less stuff to worry about. Karen's business is really taking off, and she needs the space." So, my tools got moved. 40 years of carefully organized equipment, each item in its designated place, got crammed into corners of the garage where I could barely find anything. My workbenches, the ones I'd built myself, measured and cut and assembled with pride, got shoved against the walls to make room for Karen's desk and filing cabinets. The Mustang? Karen convinced Ron to sell it while I was visiting my brother in Toledo for a long weekend. "Dad," Ron said when I got back and found an empty space where my car used to be, "we talked about this. At your age, are you really going to finish restoring a 50-year-old car? The buyer offered good money, and honestly, it was just taking up space." I stood in that garage, looking at the oil stain on the concrete where my Mustang had sat for 10 years, and felt something break inside me. That wasn't just a car. It was my connection to better days, to the satisfaction of bringing something beautiful back to life with my own hands. "How much?" I asked. "15,000, Ron said, like he was proud of the deal. I knew that car was worth at least $25,000 in its current condition, probably $40,000 when finished. But that wasn't even the point. The point was they'd sold my dreams without asking, turned my sanctuary into an office space, and expected me to be grateful for their help. Karen, meanwhile, had transformed my workshop into something unrecognizable. Carpeting where there used to be concrete floors, a fancy desk where my main workbench used to stand, file cabinets full of real estate contracts where I used to keep my lumber and hardware. Even the smell was wrong. Instead of sawdust and motor oil, it reeked of carpet cleaner and that floral air freshener Karen sprayed everywhere. The final straw came in year 4 when Karen started her safety campaign. She'd walk around the house with her phone, taking pictures of everything she deemed dangerous. My remaining power tools in the garage, the step stool I used to reach high shelves, even my coffee maker, which she claimed was a fire hazard because it was older than her marriage. "Hal," she'd say in that patient talking to a child voice she'd perfected, "we're just worried about you. At your age, living alone with all these hazards isn't safe. What if you fell and no one found you for days?" She started bringing home brochures for assisted living places, leaving them on the kitchen counter like casual reading material. Golden Years Manor, Sunset Ridge Community, Peaceful Pines Retirement Village, each one promising the same thing, a safe, supervised environment where I could enjoy my golden years without the burden of home maintenance. "Look at this one," she'd say, showing me glossy photos of old people playing checkers and doing water, aerobics. They have activities every day, meals provided, even transportation to doctor appointments. Wouldn't that be nice? No more worrying about yard work or repairs or safety issues. I knew what this was really about. Karen wanted my house, and she was playing the long game to get it. She'd been slowly pushing me out of my own space, making me feel like a burden in my own home. And now she was laying the groundwork to make it official. Every conversation about safety was really a conversation about control. Every brochure about assisted living was really a blueprint for getting rid of me. But here's the thing about us old-timers. We didn't survive Vietnam and 42 years in a factory by being pushovers. And I had something Karen didn't know about yet. In March of 2024, I did something I'd never done before. I bought a lottery ticket. Actually, I bought 2 tickets from Murphy's hardware store, where I get my coffee every Tuesday morning. Old Murphy's been running that place for 30 years, knows every regular customer by name, and always has fresh coffee and the latest local gossip. "Feeling lucky today, Hal?" Murphy asked as I handed him a $5 bill. "Hell, I don't know," I said. "Figure $2 isn't much to gamble on hope." "Why 2 tickets?" "Honestly, I'm not sure. Maybe because they cost $2 each and I had exact change. Maybe because if you're gonna do something foolish, might as well do it twice." I stuck both tickets in my tackle box and forgot about them completely. 3 weeks later, I'm in the kitchen making my morning coffee when I hear Karen screaming from the living room. Not scared screaming, excited screaming, the kind you hear when someone's team makes a touchdown. Ron comes running downstairs in his pajamas, hair sticking up every direction, and Karen's waving a lottery ticket around like it's on fire. "We won!" she's yelling, jumping around the living room in her bathrobe. "We won! 58 million! We actually won!" I nearly dropped my coffee mug. Turns out Ron had been looking for batteries in the kitchen junk drawer, found one of my lottery tickets stuck under some old takeout menus, and decided to check the numbers online just for fun. When he saw those matching digits, he called Karen down to confirm he wasn't seeing things. The house went absolutely crazy. Karen was already on her phone calling lawyers before I'd even finished processing what was happening. She was talking to financial advisors, tax specialists, investment consultants, people I'd never heard of who suddenly had very important opinions about our future. "This changes everything," she kept saying, walking around the house like she was measuring it for new furniture. "Everything." She wasn't wrong about that. For the next 2 weeks, my quiet little house turned into Grand Central Station. Lawyers coming and going in expensive suits, financial advisors with leather briefcases and fancy business cards, Karen on conference calls about portfolio, diversification, and tax optimization strategies. She started looking at houses online, big places with swimming pools, chef's kitchens, and 3-car garages. Ron got caught up in the excitement too. He started talking about quitting his new job at the insurance company where he'd finally found work after 8 months of searching. Maybe starting his own business, he said. Maybe traveling the world. Maybe finally living the life he deserved. They were spending money in their heads faster than they could count it. Me? I just watched and waited. Because I knew something they didn't know. See, when I bought those 2 tickets at Murphy's Hardware, I'd paid with my debit card. Both tickets, same transaction, same receipt. I still had that receipt in my wallet, right behind my driver's license where I always keep important paperwork. And the ticket they found, that was ticket number 2. I still had ticket number 1 sitting in my tackle box, right where I'd left it 3 weeks ago. But I kept my mouth shut and watched them plan their new life with my money. Karen started acting different almost immediately. She walked around the house like she already owned it, which I guess in her mind she did. She talked about improvements they could make, investments they should consider, opportunities they could pursue. The word "we" appeared in every sentence, but somehow those sentences never seemed to include me. The morning everything changed was a Tuesday, exactly 3 weeks after they'd discovered the winning ticket. I was out in the garage trying to find my socket wrench set. Karen had reorganized my remaining tools again, when she walked in wearing a silk bathrobe I'd never seen before. Probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Hal," she said, not even looking at me while she examined her manicure. "Ron and I have been talking. We think it would be better for everyone if you found somewhere else to live." I set down my tools and looked at her. "Excuse me? There's a very nice senior community on the other side of town, Sunset Ridge. You've seen the brochures. We'd help with the costs, of course, make sure you're comfortable, but this house is really too much for someone your age to maintain properly. She said it like she was doing me a favor, like moving me out of my own home was an act of kindness. "This is my house, Karen." She turned around then, and her mask slipped completely. The fake concern, the artificial sweetness, all gone. What remained was cold calculation. "Not for much longer," she said quietly. "We don't need your charity anymore, Hal. We don't need you taking up space, making everything complicated with your tools and your projects and your—" She waved her hand dismissively. "Your stuff." She looked around my garage like she was already planning what to do with it. "Pack what you need. Ron agrees this is best for everyone." She walked out of my garage, like she owned the place, which, in her mind, she already did. I stood there for a minute, feeling something cold settle in my chest. Then I went inside, walked to my bedroom, and opened the tackle box where I keep my fishing gear. The lottery ticket was right there where I'd left it, still in the plastic sleeve with Murphy's receipt, showing both tickets purchased in the same transaction. Same drawing, same numbers, same $58 million prize. But this was my ticket. The one I'd bought and paid for. The one I'd never given away. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, thinking about what this meant. Karen had just told me to get out of my own house because she thought she had all the power now. She thought that lottery money made her untouchable, gave her the right to throw me out like yesterday's garbage. She was about to learn different. I called my neighbor Nancy Rodriguez first. Nancy's been living next door for 15 years, and she'd watched this whole drama unfold from her kitchen window. She'd seen Karen gradually take over, watch me get pushed further and further into the corners of my own life. "Hal," she said when I told her what had just happened, "I've been waiting for you to stand up to that woman for years. What can I do to help?" Then I called my old buddy Stan Williams. Stan and I served together in Vietnam, came home together, stood up at each other's weddings. After the war, he became a cop here in town, worked his way up to detective before retiring 8 years ago. He still knows how things work, knows who to call when you need real help. "You need a lawyer, Hal," he told me after I explained the situation. "And not just any lawyer. You need someone who specializes in this kind of thing, someone who's dealt with family manipulation before." Stan connected me with Leonard Foster, an attorney who handles elder law and family disputes. Lenny was 45, sharp as a tack, and when I walked into his office with my lottery ticket and the Murphy's hardware receipt, he leaned back in his chair and smiled. "Mr. Peterson," he said, examining the documents carefully, "in Ohio, lottery prizes belong to the person who can prove they purchased the ticket. You've got the receipt, the bank statement showing the charge to your account, and the original ticket. Unless your son can prove you formally transferred ownership to him, you've got a solid case." "How long before they can claim the money?" I asked. "They have to submit the ticket for verification, which takes about 10 days for prizes this size. But here's the thing. If we file a dispute claim first, it puts a hold on everything until the commission can sort it out." Lenny pulled out a calendar and showed me the timeline. "Based on what you've told me, they're probably looking at submitting next week, maybe 2 weeks at most if their financial advisors are being thorough. So what do? We file today." That afternoon, Lenny prepared a legal notice with the Ohio Lottery Commission claiming that Harold Peterson was the rightful owner of both lottery tickets purchased in transaction number 44X7291B at Murphy's hardware store. We had documentation, we had proof of purchase, and we had the law on our side. When I got home that evening, the tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Karen was in the living room on another conference call with lawyers, and Ron was pacing around the kitchen like a caged animal. "Dad," he said when he saw me, "where have you been? Karen's been trying to reach you all afternoon." "Running errands," I said, which was technically true. 2 days later, the phone call came that changed everything. I was in the kitchen making my morning coffee when Ron's cell phone rang. He answered it, talked for a few minutes, then his face went white. "Karen," he called, his voice shaky. "You need to hear this." She came running downstairs, still in her bathrobe, expecting good news about their financial future. Instead, Ron put the phone on speaker so we could all hear their lawyer explain that the Ohio Lottery Commission had received a dispute claim on their winning ticket. "A dispute claim?" Karen's voice was sharp. "What does that mean?" "It means someone else is claiming ownership of the same prize," the lawyer explained. "Until the commission resolves the dispute, no money will be distributed." "Who?" Karen demanded. Who would file a claim? The lawyer read from the official notice. Harold Peterson, claiming to be the original purchaser of both tickets in the transaction. The silence in that kitchen was deafening. Ron looked at me like it'd grown a second head. Karen looked like she was trying to solve a math problem that didn't make sense. Dad, Ron said slowly, what's going on? I filed a claim for what's legally mine, I said calmly. I bought both tickets with my own money. I have the receipt. I never signed anything transferring ownership of the prize money to you. Karen's face went through about 5 different colors before settling on bright red. This is insane, she said, her voice getting higher with each word. You can't just take back a gift because you're angry about something. I'm not taking back a gift, I replied. I'm claiming what belongs to me. You want to check Ohio state law on bearer instruments? Be my guest. That's when Karen made her biggest mistake. She started yelling. This is about the house, isn't it? You're trying to punish us because we suggested you'd be happier somewhere else. Well, guess what, Hal? We have resources now. We can tie this up in court for years. We can have you declared incompetent. At your age, who's going to believe you're thinking clearly about anything? I let her rant while I sipped my coffee. Sometimes the best thing you can do is give someone enough rope to hang themselves. Or, she continued, trying to get control of herself, we can settle this quietly right now. You drop the claim, we give you a generous monthly allowance, and you can stay here as long as you want. Comfortable, taken care of. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I smiled. Karen, I said, in 68 years on this earth, I've learned that when someone offers to take care of you, you better read the fine print. Your idea of taking care of me involves moving Martha's pictures because they were depressing, selling my car because it's taking up space, and shipping me off to Sunset Ridge because I'm a safety hazard. I stood up. No deal. The Ohio Lottery Commission hearing was held in Columbus 3 weeks later, in a conference room that looked like every corporate meeting room I'd ever hated. Karen showed up with 2 lawyers from some fancy firm in Cleveland. I showed up with Lenny and a folder full of documentation. The mediator was a guy named Rick Coleman, who looked like he'd refereed about 1 million family fights over money. He explained that this wasn't a courtroom, but an official proceeding to determine who had the legal right to claim the prize. Karen's. Lawyers went first. They argued that I'd given the ticket as a gift, that gifts don't require paperwork, and that I was trying to renege on a completed transaction because of a family dispute. They used words like vindictive and opportunistic. Then Lenny stood up. He was calm, methodical, professional. He put 3 things on the table: my receipt for both tickets, my bank statement showing the purchase, and a printout of Ohio lottery regulations about disputed claims. Mr. Peterson bought both tickets with his own money in a single transaction, Lenny said clearly. There's no documentation transferring ownership of the winning ticket to Ronald Peterson. No signed gift form, no witnesses, no evidence of any kind that the beneficial interest in the prize was intended to pass from father to son. That's when Karen made her second big mistake. She jumped up from her chair and started yelling at the mediator. This is ridiculous! He's a stubborn old man who can stand the fact that we don't need him anymore. This whole thing is spite, pure and simple. He gave Ron the ticket, Ron won, end of story. The room went dead quiet. Rick Coleman took off his glasses and stared at her. Even her own lawyers looked embarrassed. Mom, Coleman said slowly, please take your seat. But Karen wasn't done. Everyone in this room knows what this is. It's an old man having a tantrum because we asked him to be realistic about his living situation. He can't handle that we're independent now, that we don't need his charity anymore. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Karen had just told the entire room exactly what kind of person she was, and exactly why I was fighting for what was mine. 5 days later, Lenny called with the news. The commission had ruled in my favor. The documentation was clear, the purchase was proven, and in the absence of any signed transfer, the prize belonged to the person who bought the ticket. Me. After taxes, the prize came to about $31 million. More money than I'll ever need, more money than I ever dreamed of having. The first thing I did was have Lenny draw up an eviction notice, 60 days to vacate the premises. When I handed Karen her copy in the kitchen, she read it without saying a word. Then she looked up at me and said, "You're really doing this?" "Yes," I said. "After everything we've been through, after 8 years." especially after 8 years. They were gone in 3 weeks. Karen left first, moved to Phoenix to stay with her sister while she figured out her next move. Ron took longer to pack up his life, and on his last day he stood in the kitchen looking around like he was trying to memorize the place. "This is really goodbye," he said. "Doesn't have to be," I told him. "But it's goodbye to the old way of doing things." He nodded and picked up his last bag. At the door, he turned around. "For what it's worth, Dad, I think you did the right thing." After they left, I walked through my house, for the first time in 8 years, feeling like it actually belonged to me again. I moved Martha's picture back to the mantel where it belonged. I reclaimed my workshop space, bought new tools to replace the ones that had disappeared over the years. But more than that, I started building again. Now I'm working on a rocking chair for my grandson, Ron's boy who's 8 years old and doesn't understand why Grandpa and Daddy don't talk much anymore. Maybe someday I'll explain it to him. Maybe someday his father will understand too. Ron calls me every few weeks now. We talk about work, about the weather, about everything except Karen. Last month he asked if he could come by and see the workshop. "Anytime," I told him. Because here's what I learned from all this. Family isn't just about blood. It's about respect. It's about people who see you for who you are and don't try to push you into being someone smaller, someone more convenient. Harold Peterson. 68 years old. I own my house, my workshop, and my dignity. And $31 million can buy you a whole lot of peace and quiet. Sometimes that's all an old man really needs. Because at the end of the day, respect isn't something you inherit with age. It's something you have to stand up and fight for, even when the people doing the disrespecting are your own blood. And if there's one thing I want every man my age to remember, it's this. Don't let anyone convince you that getting older means getting smaller, that needing help means giving up control, or that family loyalty should cost you your dignity.